Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. It's such a pleasure to have you all joining us on this Tuesday, December 10th. Such excited to have also Roxanne with me as always. So it's great to have you here, honey, as well. And just if you're new to Live with the Louhs, it is a show that merges both faith and psychology to kind of give you some guiding principles that you can live in your own walk of faith. You know, for a lot of us, I think, at least growing up, you know, I would always told my parents, I grew up in a very devout Christian family, but I never really, my parents were that way, but I never really knew how to apply that. And one of the things that I found in my own personal life is that one of the things I wanted to learn more and more was how do I apply what I'm hearing on a Sunday morning in people's walk of faith? And so, so grateful that you're here because that's the premise of our show. It is to merge both faith and psychology to give you some guiding principles to live by. Before we jump into our show tonight, which is going to be a great show and definitely applicable to the season that we're in right now, I do want to invite all of you that throughout the week, stay connected to us on our social media platforms. You know, it's so important. Social media has become the thing that most of us either communicate with or we gather information from, whether positively or negatively, but we try to use that platform, obviously, for the good. And so we post daily messages. We share stories that we hope encourage you all throughout the week. So we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or I should say X. It's no longer called Twitter, but Instagram, and also on YouTube, all under the headings of the Louhs, and that last name is Louhs. And all of our sermons, in fact, are archived on our Louhs YouTube channel. So definitely subscribe if you haven't done that. We hope that you'll subscribe to it and tell your friends about it. We also invite you to download our daily inspirational messages that will come to your email inbox every day. Excuse me. And you can go to our website, thelouhs.com, and /subscribe, and you'll get our daily inspirational messages that we hope inspire you as well. And as always, friends, as we're looking for Christmas gifts during this season, we're always looking for things that we can put under that Christmas tree, but why not put some things that actually help people grow in their walk of faith? And Ancient Faith, their bookstore, has a tremendous amount of great material that is there to help you in your walk of faith and also help others. I definitely would encourage you to go to their website at store.ancientfaith.com. It's a great way to support Ancient Faith, but also to just look at the great resources that are out there. We've got both of our books there, both Renewing You and 6 Hours, 7 Lessons. These are books that if you have not, and you're looking for a Christmas gift, these are great books I think that will inspire people in their own walk of faith. So definitely take advantage of that. And as always, in every one of our shows, we want to hear from you. We truly enjoy having the dialogue, the conversation. In fact, we think growth happens in the conversation. So feel free to call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. This show is also being broadcast on the Louhs Facebook page, as well as Ancient Faith's YouTube page. So if you're listening through Ancient Faith's YouTube page, leave a comment. The producer of the show, Matushka Trudy, will let us know, and we'll get to that as well. But definitely feel free to call us in. We'd love to hear your comments, especially about tonight's show. So let's get started. You know, friends, for a lot of us, we call this season of the year, or this time of the year, one of the most wonderful times of the year. It's a time where we're with family, we're with friends, we're decorating that Christmas tree, we're making cookies and food and meals and just really enjoying this season. There's Christmas carols that are being played. And obviously there's always the talk about Christmas gifts. You know, in fact, one of the biggest questions that people ask is, what do you want for Christmas? And it becomes so much a part of the commercialization, if we're not careful, about what Christmas is all about. And that's for us as adults. But what about for our children? How do we parent our children during a season in which it's becoming more and more about what we want as opposed to what Christ wants in all of us? Well, here to talk to us tonight is a dear friend of ours that we're just getting to know, Dr. Jenny Haddad Mosher, and she has a PhD in religious education. Let me just tell you a little bit about her, because I think that you're going to just enjoy talking to her and listening from her tonight. But Dr. Jenny Haddad Mosher serves CrossRoad Institute as a director of research and educational design, and hosts support groups for Crossroad parents and Christian educators as part of their new parenting work. And we'll talk about it for those of you that may not know about Crossroads, because for some of you that are not Orthodox or not part of the Orthodox Church, may not even be aware of this. We'll talk to you about that in a moment as well. She lives in Connecticut with her husband, Father Joshua. They have 3 young adult sons and her mother, and directs her parish church school. So Dr. Jenny, so nice to get to know you, and welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. So let's get started. As far as let's just kind of lay a little bit of a framework of what Crossroads is. I think that would be great for our audience and our listeners to know about it. And then we'll dive into these questions.
Absolutely. CrossRoad Institute is best well known for our summer program, which has now been around for 20 years. The CrossRoad Summer Institute is a 10-day program in the summer for juniors and seniors in high school. It's meant to be an immersive kind of 10-day experience where they get to be with their peers. They get to be with excellent Orthodox teachers. They get to be separate from their phones for 10 days. And they get to kind of really taste the rhythm of life in Christian community and have people there accessible to them for them to ask their hard questions. Our hope and our goal is to take young people who've, as much as possible, their parents have poured into them, their communities, their parishes have tried to build them up. But everybody knows there's that sort of final last step that a young person needs to make to kind of own their faith. And CrossRoad tries to kind of create an environment for them where that is easier for them to do on their own terms, in the sense that, they're separate from home, but not, separate from, all these other familiar things like worship and pastoral influence and guidance and that sort of thing. But they get a chance to kind of, in a new environment, explore orthodoxy all over again. And hear talks about how it relates to different parts of life, and maybe in ways they haven't heard about before, and to ask those questions that maybe they didn't get the chance to ask or didn't want to ask,
Absolutely.
at home. So we're really hoping to kind of meet that developmental need for kind of taking a step outside your own. Everybody loves to come up and be nurtured by their family, but there comes a point where they have to make an independent choice, to also follow Christ and to also try to conform their life to Christ. And they're about to head into college. Their life is going to be full of decisions. And so we're trying to both concretely connect them to new Orthodox friends, the other peers that are in the program, but then also give them some tools for how to be ready for kind of that new level of decision making, that new level of thinking that they're going to encounter in college, and how really we don't need to face any of that stuff with fear, because the church has equipped us all throughout history to be able to meet those challenges. So it's just a lovely transition tool that we hope that families and parishes will see as something that we provide to give their kids that experience. And as for CrossRoad Institute as a wider thing, our summer program is our flagship program, as we call it. But as we've worked with young people over 20 years, we've realized that there are other sort of sectors of their life in which they also need support. So out of our experience with CrossRoad, we birthed another program called Telos, which is a program that supports parishes and young adults in kind of getting to know each other better and learning how to work together and serve together better. And then the program that I direct right now is also our brand new parenting initiative, which at its heart is kind of a research project into what kinds of challenges Orthodox parents in America today are facing. And then at a later stage, it will also be a little bit of ministry design experimentation into how parishes can better support parents in this day and age. We also have another program about youth ministry, but basically we sort of think of young people as being at the center of our work, and we think about what are all the different ways that we can help lend support to the ways that their families and their parishes are trying to build them up in Christ. How can we kind of step in and add new tools for that whole effort? So
it's so necessary, and I'm so encouraged to hear, every time we speak to someone on the show, we learn of a new resource that, and this is the power of ancient faith and the internet, and where we just can learn, how much is available to us. And every parent listening, is always looking for more resources. And, I'm just sort of curious on that note, as you're sort of working with parents, I am so curious, before we sort of dive into the specifics of Christmas and the season we're in, what are you hearing parents sort of talking about in terms of the need, not only around the holidays, but just in general, what they're seeing with this particular particular age group of our older adolescents?
Whew. Everyone's struggling with the internet. That's sort of a universal, challenge that everyone's trying to kind of discern and be wise about. But the mental health realities have also very much risen to the fore, especially after COVID. That became something that a lot more parents were very concerned about because it became real for many more kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in general, and this is kind of the challenge of being an Orthodox parent in America generally, is that we have this incredibly rich tradition. And I like to sort of describe it as if, we all just had Thanksgiving. We're all about to have Christmas. Everybody's got their favorite holiday, right? And for these holidays, we like to we all have our own sets of family traditions that are really meaningful to us. And for us, in our family, one of the things is my mother lives with us, and she absolutely loves to set the table a certain way. We always have the same sorts of dishes. Like we're putting on, we're reenacting every time this holiday comes around, sort of this very rich kind of tapestry of what is meaningful to our family. This came from this person, this came from that person. In a way, our faith is a little bit like that, right? We have this very rich tradition that we're trying to pass on to our children, and we're trying to kind of, welcome our children into, but we're doing it in the context of a world that actually doesn't have a lot of patience for that kind of thing.
Right.
We don't have Thanksgiving dinner every day for a reason. American life is too fast, right? Instead, most of our meals are pared down, as quick as we can do it, grab it out of the fridge, that sort of thing. So how do we take such a rich and elaborate tradition and help our children both learn it and love it in a world that basically says life actually should be faster than this. Life should be simpler than this. And I think that sort of kind of existential challenge is what parents feel very keenly, is that they know that the church is full of things that are good for life, and they've benefited from it themselves, and they want to bring their children into this relationship, and to give them all this beauty. They don't necessarily know how to do that in the context of a life where their neighbors' lives look very different and very pared down compared to ours. And then there's all the practical things that come with that: scheduling challenges, priorities. How do I help my child know this is important when all these other influences in their life are telling them other things are important? So, we're sort of feel ourselves to be custodians of this amazing treasure. We want to pass it on. We're not quite sure what that looks like in the nitty-gritty of day-to-day life.
What a big challenge.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. Jenny Haddad Mosher. She is the works and serves on the CrossRoad Institute as a director of research and educational design. We're talking about, in this season of Christmas, what are some tools that we can use to help parent our children about what the true meaning of this season is about? We know that we hear a lot about, as Christians, that we need to be reminded as parents about what the true meaning of the season is. But how do we guide our children where everything that is around them is all about me, and what I want and what I desire? And so we've dedicated a show to giving us some tools to do just that. If you have a question, if you're a parent and you just have some questions about parenting in general or specifically about the Christmas season, we'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or leave a comment on Ancient Faith's YouTube page, because they're broadcasting the show at that time on their YouTube page, or also on the Louhs Facebook page. We're also broadcasting there. You can leave a comment there, and we'll definitely get to it as well. So, Dr. Jenny, I think one of the things that, since we're talking about this Christmas season and parenting, for Orthodox families, in general terms, how should we be thinking about the point, or really the goal of what the Christmas season is all about?
Yeah, I think the most important piece is that we have to remember that before the Christmas season comes the Advent season. Right. Whereas, for American society, it's all the Christmas season. And, Christmas is one of the major feasts of the year. It's, celebrating the birth of Christ. And so fundamentally, it's the celebration of this incredible gift, we've all been given. But the fast, Advent, before it's given to us as this way of preparing for the feast. And that's essentially, if you really boil it down, that's all fasts are they're periods of preparation. And I find that especially working with parents, sometimes even that sort of simple lens is super helpful because, you turn on your television, you walk into the stores, it's all Christmas now all the time, like from now until December 25. And to help be able to stand back and see that actually Christmas is not yet, right? Really. There's all these signs of Christmas, and some of them are signs that we can, and it's perfectly all right to participate in. But actually there's this distinct thing before Christmas, Advent, for getting ready for Christmas. And that it's okay for that period to feel different from Christmas. In fact, it's good for that period to feel different because it helps build the anticipation of the feast for our kids. I think one of the challenges that I as an adult feel like in this time of year is that the saturation, the overexposure, like to all things Christmas, can really kind of jade our appetite for things Christmas. We're thrilled when by the time, December 26th rolls around, the radio stops playing, all the music, which is kind of sad, but that's sort of the effect on us. But it's good to recognize that and realize that maybe one of the most helpful things we can do for our kids is help make these two periods feel different through various means. And one of the ways that I've found has been most successful when my kids were little is as much as possible, because so much gets added to these months in terms of busyness and expectations and all that sort of thing, as much as possible to simplify and pare down sort of what we do as a family so that we don't kind of be overwhelmed in our capacity to enjoy what we are doing, and to think very concretely, what are we doing now that is helping us get ready for Christmas? And that can be things like, some of them are things that, would be recognized as stuff that people do in the Christmas season, like, decorating could be part of that, having things in your home, but also reading books, the Christmas story or other stories in preparation for Christmas, all as the way as we talk to our children, saying, this great thing is coming and we are getting ready for it, and similarly, in addition to like adding things in, like decorating or reading stories, or, maybe doing a Jesse tree, which is scripture reading every day in preparation, what should we be taking out? Obviously people think about the fast in terms of food often, but can we be simplifying in other ways? One thing that I always love to do with my kids during fasting periods was, that's when we would like clean out everybody's closets, in terms of, let's go through the toys, like what do we not need anymore? What could somebody else use? Let's go through our clothes, let's do that. Kind of thinking about, what St. Basil says, that if you have extra stuff, it actually belongs to someone else. You should be getting, moving it along so they can have it. And so instituting sort of ways that our children can realize that this period is not just about like, oh, let me think about all the presents or all the treats that are coming, but it's also like, we are trying to make our lives simpler and more focused right now because something great is coming and we want to be ready for it. And something that we want to enjoy as much as possible. And I always used to sort of talk about fasting in that way to my kids when they were little, like, why don't we eat this or that? It's like, so we'll enjoy it more, like when the feast comes, because, the whole point of the feast is to like celebrate as much as possible this incredible present.
Right.
And so we're going to save some things for the feast. We'll do some things now in terms of, like I said, decorating and that kind of thing, but all of it with an eye towards getting ready. And just that very simple lens of getting ready, both, in external ways, but also in internal ways.
I love that separation. I really, the way you sort of talked about it, just the words that you're using to describe the difference between the feast and the preparation. I think a lot of people in Advent, they think about fasting, but they don't really think about it as a sort of getting prepared in all of these ways, and sharing down and paring down and, reading and really kind of what are we doing to get ready for this sort of incredible gift. To me, that's a beautiful way to talk to your kids about it, right? I think that's fantastic. And for many of the stores, Christmas started before Halloween, right? So yeah. These conversations
to get earlier every year.
Yes, right after summer. What are the challenges do you think about when you think about families doing this sort of paring down and simplifying and taking time to read? What are the challenges to that goal that you're encountering in society today?
Mm-hmm. I think one set of challenges is always just expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from many different places. Some of it comes from society. We turn on the TV and there's commercials of what Christmas should look like, in your house, and kids see that stuff. But then there's also other people's, their friends' homes, or even your own family, sometimes can have expectations of what should be going on during the Christmas, season. Like, oh, we want to do this activity with the kids during the Christmas season. Actually, can we say that until maybe after Christmas? You're trying to kind of create this, like I said, different spirit to one part, to the fast versus the feast. And not everybody is looking at it through that lens. And so their expectations may be very concretely different in terms of what you should be doing with your kids and what your kids should be doing. And sometimes that means that they will, kind of cast a negative light, like, oh, you aren't letting your kids have fun, or, you're sort of holding them back from participating in different things. I would say expectations are a huge piece of it. There's so many concrete expectations because we're such a consumeristic culture at this point, what Christmas should look like and the kinds of activities that should be involved in this season, that can feel very heavy to parents. That they're being kind of looked at and judged and, being told that they should be doing certain things, even if they're trying to do something else. And then sometimes those expectations come from ourselves as well. If we have our own kind of experiences of Christmas and we're just not sure, especially if we didn't grow up Orthodox, how do we sort of create a season of preparation instead of just a season of, jumping into the consumption. And the consumption is also sort of an interesting piece of the puzzle because obviously there's gifts, and the expectations around gifts, and it's very real for children that different families sometimes give different levels of gifts. And that can be something that sometimes parents have to navigate with their children, either because they can't necessarily afford what other people can afford, but also just is that really what Christmas is for? Should we be giving each other monstrously expensive gifts, or is that the expectation? But then there's also sort of the sort of consumption of activities and even emotional experiences, that Christmas should feel a certain way, that you should be, sort of having this kind of an experience, which of course, anybody who works in the church knows is a very, Christmas and the holidays are actually a really hard time for a lot of families, they've had a loss or that sort of thing. And so the expectation that Christmas means a certain configuration of experiences, gifts, foods, emotional experiences, parents look at all that and they think, okay, if my children's Christmas doesn't look like that, am I doing something wrong? And I find, especially when we talk about these kinds of things in the parenting support groups that we're running, in some ways, what parents need most is somebody to give them permission to not have to do it all.
Yeah, I think that's important to talk about, as I sort of watch my clients, moving through December. Yeah, parents go from, I feel better able to do some of these things than when December hits, the expectations from the teachers in the classrooms and all the 75 new things that are now, from the Christmas party to the white elephant to the snack for the kids has to be a certain way. And then the, costumes for this, it picks up in the opposite direction of simplification, and parents sort of are, navigating not only their own Christmas traditions, but then all the expectation of the culture and communities around them who all have their own separate Christmas expectations. And
That's
parents, I feel are really struggling to know what is right and to trust their intuition and to have permission to say, oh, I may not be able to do that one, or I may not, my kid may not make it to this, or, we're going to miss that Christmas party, because there's really so many expectations in the opposite direction of simplification. So I do feel like they struggle with the permission to sort of, trust the intuition that what is our capacity and what are we going to give up if we say yes to that?
Yeah, I've definitely told younger moms it's okay to be the lame mom. In sense of like, and there's still things you need to navigate around that. I think there's sometimes times when it's not just that we don't want to disappoint our kids' teachers or something like that, but obviously our children live in community, in schools and with friends, and they there's the potential of disappointing them, like on some level. And to be able to have those kinds of conversations with your children and say, look, here's what's on our plate this week, and here's like what I've observed might be hard about us doing this thing and this thing. And I'm going to suggest that we only do this. And maybe to make that a little like more fun, we'll, add something else to it in terms of like, we'll stop by and get, pick up a treat or something, but overall we're simplifying like the bigger picture, to show kids that you're not dismissing like the things that they've been told are important or fun, and that you care about whether or not they are enjoying their experience of, whatever activities are going on. But also it's a good modeling to them that life is finite, like, that energy is finite, and it's okay to say no to experiences. We will still have fun in other ways. And, maybe not this year, but maybe next year, we'll see, like, kind of thing.
I love that.
It's okay to say, and it's okay to say, our family does things a little differently. It's okay. That family is going to do that. You were invited, but that, that conflicts with vigil. But that's all right. That doesn't mean, you can't still be a good friend to them. We'll do something else with them another time. We're going to do this, like, and just with a certain, as much self-confidence as we can muster, which I know that parents, we don't always feel, right? Project to them that it's okay to control your own schedule. Because a lot of parents really feel like so many other bodies and people are controlling their children's schedule. Like, they don't realize that it's okay to put boundaries, like on how much we do, when we do it, that sort of. I'm sure you see it all the time.
Yeah, we're up against a break, Dr. Jenny, but I on the other side of this break, I would love for us to talk about not only, in some ways how we as as Christians in general have almost taken Christmas and actually have a very warped idea about what Christmas is about in the way in which we live out our own faith. I mean, how we've kind of found ourselves just, buying into this idea that, this is all about, this feeling of Christmas as opposed to really what Christ did for us, how he comes into the span of history and time and really reminds us and saves us. He begins the salvific story for us. I will definitely want to talk to you about that on the other side of this break. We'll be right back here on Live with the Louhs.
Live with the Louhs with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. They would love to hear from you.
During his darkest moments on the cross, Jesus uttered 7 statements. His words offer us principles to live by, lessons of hope, peace, and comfort. I'm Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
And I'm Father Nicholas Lowe.
And our new book, 6 Hours, 7 Lessons, is all about how Christ's light transcends our darkness.
Christ's final words have the power to bring us into the light of his love and protection, providing wisdom and direction to follow when we face our own dark seasons. Get your copy today by going to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Live with the Louhs and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne. Do you have a question for the Louhs? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to Live with the Louhs. Again, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We're speaking with Dr. Jenny Haddad Mosher. She works with the CrossRoads Institute, an amazing organization that I encourage all of you to check out, especially for those of you that have parents that are older adolescents. The programs that they have are just extraordinary, and we'll definitely get to that throughout the show. We'll keep telling about how you can find out more information about that. But we're talking about tonight about parenting during this Christmas season, and we'd love to hear from you if you're a parent, or if you just have some thoughts, or maybe you have some ideas that maybe help for some of the other parents tuning in. Feel free to call us or leave a comment. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or feel free to leave a comment on Ancient Faith's YouTube page, as they're broadcasting there as well, and on the Louhs Facebook page, where we're also broadcasting there. We'd love to hear from you. Dr. Jenny, right before the show, right before this break, actually, we were talking about, the Christmas and some of the difficulties that it is for parents to kind of navigate parenting because of all the different distractions that are really out there, not only in our children's lives, but also in our lives. And I was just saying, as you were talking, I couldn't help but think how easy it is for us in many ways to, especially in the West, and in this country, we can so often we can actually have an idea about what our faith is based upon Christmas, that God is supposed to always give us presents and always give us these things. And we have like this idea of this Christmas of a God that we worship, at least the gift part of it, at least. And I think so often after Christmas, studies reflect this as well, that January ends up being one of the most depressing months, the most lonely months, because for a lot of people, they need that joy, that excitement, that feeling, if you will, during the month of December. And when that stops on that December 26th, in many ways, their emotions go out the window with it. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, just reminding us about just not only the fact that we're celebrating Christ, and we all understand that, but taming also the emotions and the expectations and the feelings that we are kind of creating to something that was really never God's intent. I mean, if I'm making sense.
Sure. So one of the ways I like to get at this is to ask people, and I'll ask you, since this is a conversation, what are your memories of meaningful traditions from your own childhood?
One of the biggest things that I remember growing up is that is the food. I'm sorry, but it was
yeah, of course.
my mother would put a table of food, and still does, God bless her. But I just remember, and I remember food. I mean, there are dishes that I can think vividly in my mind right now that really spark an interest to me about that. But also, us going to church, that was a non-negotiable that we always did on Christmas Eve, in which we were in the church. And back in those days, they would do late night services. In a lot of Orthodox churches, we do them earlier in the day on Christmas Eve. But those midnight services that I would go to, that's also something I remember quite vividly.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's always interesting about the kinds of memories people share is almost none of them are ecstatic,
Right.
almost none of them are really like this kind of high, hyped up, emotional sort of what we're being told, like on the television, Christmas is all about. It's often the quiet stuff. It's often the stuff that, like your mother's food is, an incarnation of her love, for you,
Right.
and all that, all the preparation that would go into it, and the ways in which it was special and different from everyday food, and she was doing it just for you. And I think that's the first piece, is to realize that what makes a tradition meaningful and what makes our faith meaningful is very rarely about excessive emotion, but it's almost always about connection, and the quieter things of connection. So prayer and church in the middle of the night probably didn't always feel so great for you as a kid, but was it meaningful? 100%, right? Because it was something very intentional that your family was doing to connect yourselves to God and to each other, as part of Christmas. And that's the thing, is so many of the traditions that, the more sort of secular and consumerist traditions that have crept in, they are, some of them, very exciting, but not necessarily very meaningful. And if we can sift through to the meaningful things, I think it will help feed our souls in a way that makes the post-sugar high, like the drop-off after Christmas, not quite so severe, because we'll have been fed on things that are more substantive. And so that's why things like cultivating our connection with Christ through actually like digging into the stories of Christ's birth and then what happens. I mean, I'm always struck every single year when we go to church for liturgy, on Christmas Day, like, here we are, we've arrived. It's time for the beautiful Christmas service. We've all been waiting. And what is the gospel? The denouement of the gospel? Like, we're already heading off into the slaughtering of the children, right? And it's just, it's so real. It's, Christ comes into the world not for something sort of fluffy and ephemeral, and now everything's going to be solved, and like life is going to be perfect, but already like conflict and, that sort of calling into account of what what the world thinks is good and doesn't think is good. And so in the same way, if we engage with the real true story of Christmas and focus on those traditions that connect us to Christ itself, that we will be strengthened by that to weather like the sort of the drop off afterwards. And that's how we grow overall, right? That's what the fast is preparation for the feast, but the feast itself is also preparation for the next feast.
That's right.
And that's one of the things that I always love about the fact that Christmas is an extended period. Everybody talks about the 12 days of Christmas, and they think it's the wrong 12 days. Like, they all think it's before Christmas, but being able to celebrate Christmas afterwards, which helps with that, giving your children a different sense of before and after. If you actually have more of an extended celebration post December 25th, we used to do it by stretching out our kids' presents. Oh, wow. We wouldn't open everything on the 25th necessarily. We'd, open things every couple days, and we would save, obviously, like most of the festive foods for after the 25th. And then we would also, look forward to Theophany and have special things that we were, preparing to get ready for Theophany. And all of those things, like, help with the fact that in the United States, it just feels like a build, this huge peak, and then that's it.
Exactly. Right.
But for us, it's really meant to be much more gradual and much more sustained in a way.
So what traditions really proved fruitful in your family life? I'm so curious.
So it's funny. I actually asked my young adult sons this question in preparation for the podcast, because I didn't want to give my impressions. I wanted to ask, I was like, what actually affected them, as opposed to what my ideas were of what affected them, right? And I was surprised because most of the ones they named had to do with waiting. being made to wait for things, right? That sort of anticipation. When they were very little, we had an artificial tree. And so that gave me the luxury of, having it up in the house for a long time, because it wouldn't fall apart and set on fire and all those sorts of things. And the way I would use it was that we would put it up on St. Nicholas Day at the beginning of December, but then we wouldn't decorate it, except a little bit at a time over the Christmas season. And we wouldn't put lights on it until Christmas Eve. And then we would have it up throughout the whole Christmas season. And they said, one of them said that waiting for the tree to be fully decorated over that long period of time was something that, really built up, a sense of expectation in him as a kid. And it's funny, when he said that, I remembered my own childhood where we would have a tree that would go up all at once, but my mother would close the door, nobody could see it, until Christmas morning, because she didn't want anybody to go in there and feel presents and try to guess what they were getting and all that kind of thing. Right. And I remember lying on the floor of the door, outside the door, looking underneath, trying to see if I could see it, and these are things that we don't think hard, those are the things that kids do, right? Because that's what they're trying to kind of get inside of this mystery of, what's going on and all that. But we don't think about those things as the things that build a sense of anticipation, but they exactly are. It's the thing we're not doing. We're not letting them look at it. We're not, so that was sort of a bit of a surprise. And then one of them mentioned the whole Jesse tree tradition, which we did do when they were kids, which is, there's a number of versions of it out there. There's some that are free on the internet, some that are more commercial products. But essentially, it's scripture reading for each day of Advent that intentionally builds up towards the Christmas story. And they said that it absolutely 100% helped them contextualize your sort of Christmas as an event, because you lead up with readings from the prophets and expectation of Jesus, and then finally the story comes together. So those were things that were very meaningful for them in terms of thinking ahead. I think also, we were a priest family like you guys. Which always brings in its own kind of burdens in a way, but, blessings, but also burdens. And they also love the fact that we would do, after Vigil, we would come home. And this is kind of funny, but our tradition for Christmas Eve dinner was actually Indian takeout because it was fasting. It meant I didn't have to cook. We'd been in a long vigil, and it would just, the Hindus would deliver it and it would appear. It would be lovely. And then for Christmas Eve, we would eat our takeout, and then we would open our own presents within the family then, and it meant that they could, Vigil always felt long and for them, and because they were little, like everybody, it felt long for the adults, but they always had something on the other end of it. They always knew that at the other end, Christmas would start in some real meaningful way, even though then the next morning we would, get up, go to liturgy, and then we'd have Christmas, then we'd drive to my parents' house and be able to open other presents there. But it wasn't like they had to go live all through liturgy and then all through liturgy, through Vigil, before anything festive started to peek out at them, basically. And so by starting to kind of unwrap things a little bit sooner, it helped them. I always say in my family, one of my mantras is morale is important. You have to think about children's morale, our own morale. We can have all the best intentions in the world, but if nobody has the motivation to do it because the morale has tanked, then we're never going to do it. So let's look for ways to keep the morale alive.
Boost people's morale. I love that you're thinking about what's going to boost their morale and make them more willing to kind of sit through and be present in things that are hard, or waiting on something that's going to be super fun and exciting.
And encouraging them also to, I think sometimes at Christmas, it's so easy. Of just, if you didn't get what you wanted, that negativity sometimes can kind of permeate throughout the day, and those kind of unhealthy morals, if you will, that can kind of just water down the holiday season on that day for sure. Dr. Jenny, I was thinking, as you were speaking, for a lot of people, and I loved how you were mentioning this earlier about the 12 days of Christmas, how, especially in the West, that is oftentimes talked about the 12 days before Christmas. But let's talk about the fact that in the Christian tradition, as it was for centuries, this was the time between Christmas and Theophany or Epiphany. Let's talk about how parents can celebrate that period as well, because I think that I loved how you were saying that it's a drop off for so many of us. After Christmas, the music's not playing. That you start seeing people take down the trees like 2 or 3 days later. And it's. But talk about the 12 days, the actual 12 days of Christmas, and when they fall, and how important the parents can celebrate that as well.
Yeah. So as I've already mentioned, we left our tree up for that. And even nowadays we do get a live tree, and I wait until, the bitter end to buy it, so it will last. So we did leave our tree up. We left it decorated. We stretched out gifts, but there are also actually readings that are associated with the days between that can be done as a family. And then when my kids were little, we also had a tradition where we would, because Theophany, I always loved Theophany is one of my favorite feasts. Honestly, in some ways, it's more favorite than Christmas. It doesn't come with all the trappings that Christmas does, but it's so beautiful. And it's
it's actually older than Christmas, which is, quite interesting for people that may not be aware of that. But yeah, as far as a feast day in the church.
For a long time, it was kind of both Christmas and Theophany were sort of seen as this unified feast of basically, these two great, pieces of Christ's revelation, and we would, we would do an Advent wreath, or an Advent kind of activity, kind of like an Advent wreath, where we would every Sunday leading up in Advent, we would light a candle till we got closer and closer to Christmas. And then when Christmas Day came, we would light the central sort of white candle in the middle. And then at some point in my children's childhood, I realized, I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm not giving up this candle lighting thing. And we started lighting a new white candle for each day of Christmas, so that by the time Theophany came, the middle of the table was this beautiful blaze of light, and it was so visually and aesthetically compelling. Every kid loves candles, right? That's the first thing you see children wanting to mess with in church is the candles, right? Right. And so I just realized this was a great way to kind of compel their attention. And so by the time we got to Theophany, we would have all 12 candles in the middle. And then there's actually a tradition in the Arab world, you may be aware of it, that Theophany is associated with fried things. We make donuts, basically. And so we would make, or if I was feeling lazy that year, I'd go out and buy, donuts, and just kind of giving it its own distinctive kind of a flavor, to show that this is its own. This is yet another thing that we can celebrate, yet another gift. And the great blessing of water, one of the things that, it's one of my favorite parts of the feast, but it's also one of my favorite things to do in church with children, around the great blessing of water, my own and other children, is just encourage them to get up there around that font and watch that blessing, because it's such there's so much incredible concrete language in those prayers, and it's about our whole life. It's not just about the baptism of Jesus. It's about every single thing that water, is part of, and children relate to that so concretely because, they're very elemental beings. They think in terms of, wet, dry.
Right.
So
I love that.
It's a wonderful feast to kind of draw them to the concrete celebration of
And I just love how much you're linking everyday life with the sort of liturgical calendar that we exist in, actually, in this sort of spiritual element of our world that we sometimes forget as we're moving through, the worldly holidays. There's this sort of always this liturgical piece that exists outside of us, and also what's coming after one ends. There's something else coming, and earlier in the show you were talking about really how do we of course, if the Orthodox Church was analogous to a Thanksgiving dinner. How do we, heat up, microwave sweet potatoes instead of, the elegant, with the fine china. And that really spoke to me because in many ways, our Orthodox traditions are so incredibly rich. And that was such a great analogy, the formal ware on the Thanksgiving table and all the things that go into it. And it's this, huge thing. But, in daily life, how do we make our Orthodox faith in all of its richness, accessible in small bites that, you can throw in the microwave, because I think that that is what, in this fast paced, busy world, I think every parent is asking, hey, where are the microwave sweet potatoes? Because we want the doses that we can do a little bit of each day. And in working with parents, I would just be sort of curious as to what your greatest tips would be, for how parents could make Thanksgiving dinner, accessible daily with our faith.
Well, 110%, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's just like in pretty much all things that are good for us. Often there's this temptation that, we want to, we have this ideal, like, our life needs to look like this. And sometimes we apply that to faith too. We're like, our life needs to be so perfect. Like, we're going to have like the perfect liturgical observances with our children. And we're going to, always read the Bible every day. And we're going to do all these things. And all these are great things to aspire to. But when we don't do them, when we fail, then we become discouraged. Or we've set ourselves so high a bar that, we find it impossible to meet in the first place. And so don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, meaning it's better, or as Father Tom Hopko would say, don't pray as you think you should, but as you can. And in the same way, those things that you can do them. So if you can only read, a short, like, if you don't tell yourself you have to read a chapter of the Bible every day with your children necessarily. If you can't do that, read less. It's okay. If you can't, like I said, make donuts yourself for theophany, buy donuts. And then think of I like to also think of like low stress, low work ways to make things easier and available that just keep whatever season we're in, whatever on our minds. So another one of the tricks I kind of would do with Advent is I would just have a tablecloth that was the same color as the liturgical, hangings that we were using during Advent in church. Just be like, yep. And then when Christmas came, we changed it to white. That didn't require much of me every day. One year, once upon a time, I went out and I bought a set of tablecloths that were all like the same colors, but it kind of kept it on our brains. And to just look for, okay, if this is what I'm thinking of as the ideal, what is the smaller version of this that I could do, and we're all told this, I feel like, by our spiritual fathers, as part of our prayer rules too, like, that we kind of see the ascetic ideal, but actually, what do we actually manage to pull off?
Right. I love that. I mean, I think that is so huge. I mean, it sounds so simple, but really the permission you're giving yourself, that's what's huge, because I think so many people don't do anything because they can't do everything. And that's, so often I remember when I set out to sort of read the Bible in 1 year, it was supposed to be 1 year. It took me 2. And, at times I'm like, I'm not getting to it. And there's the temptation to just go, well, forget it, start all over again. And, it's like, at some point you just realize, well, just do what you can. There's just that moment of do what you can. And eventually, okay, it took 2 years, but it took 2 years and that's okay. And now, I kind of miss that and go, oh, look, I really miss that, routine I had, in the mornings, and I have a different one now, and it doesn't speak to me quite as much, but it's still something, and I keep sort of pivoting and adapting until I have something that really speaks to me. And I have a little bit less time now than I did then, and so I've adapted it, but I find that this is where the phone is really great. I mean, I can get a reading from the Church Fathers every single day that lands on my phone, and there's a notification that it's there. So maybe I don't sit down to read the entire book, but I get a snippet every single day of our Church Fathers. I get a snippet of a scripture every single day. I get a devotional every day. And the combination of those things is surely going to speak life. And so it may not be, the full Bible in 1 year as I was doing before. But again, I think we have to always look for how do we adapt, to what we do and can do without being so upset about, the richness and the fullness and everything we wish we want to be doing isn't there, because it isn't always feasible. So I just, that really speaks to me, and I'm sure so many who are listening.
And I think too, Roxanne, just to kind of build on what you were sharing is, I think for a lot of people, that's how they are. Oftentimes in confessions, people will say, I just want to be back to where I was back then when I first came into the church. I was on fire for Christ, and I was so connected. And then now, Father, I don't feel like I'm that connected. But it's just like how we grow in different seasons, and God is working in our lives in different points. And so just recognizing that, like with Christmas, I think that's the key here is that, for a lot of us, we leave that Christmas season, we're like, well, I just want to go back to what that was. And that was like that, the way that season made me feel, in the month of January, and we're struggling. And I think the challenge is, as you're beautifully sharing, Dr. Jenny, is the importance of us recognizing that is this buildup that the church inserts in our lives through the season of Advent. And not only does it build it up towards Christmas, but then these 12 days that follow, and making sure that Christ is at the forefront of all of that. I think it's so important. And I love how you were sharing, just giving even a Bible verse every day that, for your children, or just, that you could share with that would lead up to, or at least speak to, something within the Christmas or Advent season, is so powerful, because, it's so easy to take Christ, as the old adage says, we take Christ out of Christmas. I mean, it's becoming so much of a commercial holiday that people that are not even Christians actually love celebrating it, because of the way it makes them feel. And so I think what you're sharing, Dr. Jenny, and it's really so powerful. And I hope a lot of parents will take that. I know that there's a lot of information. I think that that Roxanne and I know that we could definitely implement and utilize in our own family, because they're just such great ideas. So I really appreciate that. I do want to, just before we, because we're already at the end of the show, tell us where they can find out information about the CrossRoads Institute websites, where they can find out if there's a parent that says, what, I'd love for my adolescent child who's in high school to be part of this. Where can they go?
Absolutely. CrossRoadInstitute.org. And our application season for the summer of 2025 is open right now. And actually, if it's an experience you want for your child, it's great to get them to apply as soon as possible, because then they will get their first choice of session. We offer 4 sessions, 2 in Boston, 1 in New York this summer, and also 1 in South California. And they're spread over the course of the summer, and they're each 10 days. And a child can basically apply with a very simple online form. Then they will need a couple of recommendations after that point, but those can come in later. And similarly, they need a transcript from high school or their homeschool transcript, but that can also come in later. But it's actually quite a simple application in which they just tell us a little bit about themselves and what they're hoping out of the experience, and what some of their questions about like orthodoxy right now and where they're at. And then we review it and we get back to them. So I also like to encourage people that there is financial aid for CrossRoad. You shouldn't be deterred by cost, because we've never turned anyone away for cost. And we are always looking to fill our sessions with kids from all jurisdictions. And we like to say that all kinds of kids enjoy CrossRoad. The kids who liked camp, the kids who didn't like camp, the kids who are super excited about church, and the kids are not so sure. So, if you have a teen who's at the point, a junior or senior in high school, who's really, either ready for new challenge in their Orthodox faith, or really, wondering, does this make sense, and I need somebody else to kind of bounce stuff off of, CrossRoad can be a great place for them.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
So, and everyone, I would just encourage you. This is a great ministry. We actually had our dear friend, Dr. Ann Bezaridis, on here, who also is part of the CrossRoads Institute, who was on our show, I think, about a year ago, talking about this ministry. It is an outstanding ministry. We wouldn't push it if it wasn't something that we thought that all of us should be doing, or at least encouraging our children to do. So again, it's crossroadinstitute.org. Dr. Jenny, thank you so much for being on our show tonight. What a joy to get to know you. I know Roxanne and I really have enjoyed having you on the show, and the ideas that you shared with us and the skills that you've really imparted in us to parent during this Christmas season, we really appreciate.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me, and I hope everybody has a beautiful season.
Yes,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And to Machuska Trudy, who's produces our show, we always thank her as well. And before we let you guys know, we are so excited to announce about our brand new website will be launched very soon. So we'll tell you all about it next Tuesday. But we have been working for, Roxanne, I think about 2-3 months now on this new website.
Right.
And so we're launching it this week. You'll hear more about it, though, through our social media platforms. So definitely connect with us on the Louhs, on our Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. You'll find out all about it there. Join us next Tuesday for a brand new show right here on Live with the Louhs. God bless you all, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of their books Renewing You, A Priest, a Psychologist, and a Plan, and 6 Hours, 7 Lessons, How Christ's Light Transcends Our Darkness, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.